The first red flag wasn't Ethan's smug little smirk. It was the email. A summons to HR at 7:58 a.m. No subject line. Just a sap in all caps typed with the urgency of a panicked toddler pretending to be an adult. Dana hadn't even finished her second coffee when she walked in and saw him already sitting in her chair, like he owned the oxygen in the room. Ethan Langford, 28 years old, dressed in entitlement, squeezed into a slim-fit blazer, an overpriced haircut doing most of the talking. He didn't even look up when she entered. She just tapped a pen against his teeth. Bored, like he was waiting on a food delivery not about. To gut the heart of the company, Dana, he said finally, dragging out her name like it personally offended him. Thanks for coming in early. We'll keep this brief. The HR rep sat frozen in the corner, eyes glued to the wall, posture of a hostage. No eye contact. That's when Dana knew Shay didn't need the speech. Of course, Ethan gave it anyway. After reviewing departmental efficiencies, he began using a phrase he'd clearly lifted from LinkedIn that morning. We've concluded. Your role has become non-essential. We're streamlining legacy costs and bringing in fresh perspectives. Effective immediately. You're relieved of your duties. He smiled. Actually smiled. Like he'd just solved world hunger by cutting loose. The woman who'd kept the entire logistics operation from collapsing into flaming chaos. Dana didn't flinch, no begging, no dramatic outburst. She calmly adjusted her blazer, slid the company-issued laptop across the table like she was handing over a dead goldfish, and stood, streamlined this. She muttered quiet enough for only herself, and walked out with more grace than he'd earn in a lifetime. It's funny. You give a company 15 years, bleed into the cracks of its foundation, clean up its messes, save it during every merger panic. And one kid with a business degree and his daddy's passwords can erase you. Before 9 a.m. and hey, quick pause. If you've ever been kicked in the teeth by some Ethan in your life and kept walking, help me hit my first ever 10,000 subscribers. You'd be amazed what kind of revenge we can cook up with just a story and a little support. Back in her office, former Officina packed her box, photos of her dogs, a framed quote from her mother. Don't get even. Get everything. And taped beneath the drawer. A small flash drive. One handwritten label, Clause 1 to see. She didn't cry. Didn't curse. Just walked out through the same glass doors she'd opened every morning for 15 years. This time, she didn't badge out. She paused, smiled at the receptionist, and said, "Don't bother disabling my login just yet." The kid thought he'd chopped the head off a relic. Didn't realize he'd just unplugged the power source. The box was still warm from the car. Right home when Dana set it down in her dining room, beside a half-dead orchid and an unopened bottle of Merlot she'd been saving for a win. This wasn't the win she'd planned, but it would do. She ignored the wine. Not yet. Instead, she crossed the living room to a tall, nondescript cabinet no one else had ever opened. She slid the panel aside, entered a 6-digit code that hadn't changed in 15 years, and waited. Click. The drawer groaned open like it hadn't been touched in a decade, which was only half true. Inside, the documents were pristine, archived, like sacred scrolls. She flipped past old W-2 South, performance reviews from a VP who'd cried when he got laid off. And finally, a sealed envelope. Langford original inside was the contract, back when the company was one bad quarter from bankruptcy. Dana hadn't just stepped up. She rebuilt half their back-end systems from scratch. She wrote the automation logic for their freight routing software in her own living room, eating cold Chinese takeout and dodging creditors. She hadn't asked for a bonus. She'd asked for something smarter. And Ethan's father, Harold Langford, the real CEO, not the suit-wearing heir she met that morning, had been smart enough to give it to her. Clause 1 to C.3 quiet paragraphs buried between arbitration language and standard non-disclosures. But Dana remembered every word. IP rights to any custom software she authored on her own equipment. A 2.5% equity stake if the company hit a specific revenue threshold. It had hit that number 3 years ago. No payout, no acknowledgement until now. The kicker. All executive restructuring decisions required her signature if she was employed at the time and if her systems were still in use. Check and check. Dana didn't rage, didn't pace the room. She simply pulled out her phone, opened a scanner app, and went to work. Scan. Save. Encrypt. One copy to her personal inbox. One to her employment attorney, the same one who helped her write the clause in the first place. And one to Janice Marrow, board member since year 7. Janice had once told her over crab cakes, "If the boys ever turn on you, send me proof. I'll handle the knives." By the time the attachments hit Janice's inbox, Dana was already drafting a clean bullet point summary of every active system still running on Langston Freight Protocol, her original code base. It was still in use. She didn't even need to check. They'd just slapped a new name on it last year. Ethan opts as if rebranding could erase fingerprints from code. She closed the cabinet, locked it, and picked up the Merlot from the table and poured herself half a glass. She didn't toast. She calculated tomorrow wouldn't be about proving Ethan wrong. Would be about reminding the entire board why Dana Langston was never someone you could simply streamline. Harold Langford returned to the office on a gray Tuesday with a stitched-up gut, short fuse, and the creeping realization that leaving his son in charge of him for a week was like handing a toddler a chainsaw and hoping for landscaping. His assistant, Rhonda Stone-faced 65, and genuinely terrifying, met him at the elevator with a stack of papers and a single post-it note. "You'll want coffee first." The moment Harold stepped into his office, he saw it. Dana's scanned contract, printed in triplicate, neatly clipped, placed dead center on his mahogany desk like a legal landmine. His heart sank before he read a word. Clause 1 to C was circled in red for half a second. Hope flickered. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe? She was posturing, making noise. It's on her way out. Then he saw the signature at the bottom. His signature. Notarized, the date matched the week after the distribution center crash. Dana had pulled the company out of the fire with a system she built on a laptop older than Ethan's last girlfriend. Harold sank into his chair. His stomach twisted again, but this time it wasn't the surgery. "Rhonda," he said. She leaned in, already texted him. "He's coming." Harold didn't thank her. He just rubbed his temples and stared at the clause again, reading it like a sentence he'd written himself. And maybe he had. A knock. Ethan walked in, breathing swagger and Spotify confidence. "Welcome back, old man. Glad to see you survived." Harold didn't look up. "Did you fire Dana Langston?" "Yeah, totally legit," Ethan said, dropping into the guest chair, leg bouncing. HR signed off. Her role was ancient. Honestly. Dead weight. "You're always saying we need to cut costs." "I cut." Harold slowly lifted his eyes. "Did you read her contract before you did it?" Ethan shrugged. "Why? It's like 100 pages of boomer legalese. She's bluffing." Emailed the board some dusty PDF, hoping for a payout. Bitter ex-employee move. Harold slid the papers across the desk. Ethan picked them up like he was being handed a menu. Clause 12. Paragraph C, Harold said, voice dry as sand. "She has veto rights over structural changes, including terminations. And if her software is still in use, which it is, firing her without board review is a breach." Ethan blinked. Wait. It can't be real. That's insane." "Would you give her that? Because 15 years ago," Harold snapped, "your father was bleeding money. And Dana wrote a logistics system that saved this company from folding like a lawn chair in a hurricane." The silence stretched. "That clause is real," Harold continued. "So is the equity. So is the IP. And if she presses this, she doesn't just get her job back." He leaned forward. "She owns part of your job now." Ethan went pale. "Bootai already filed the termination. Severance is processed. Then you'd better pray she doesn't cash it." For the first time since Ethan strutted into the role, like it came with a toy and fries, something cracked that twitched behind the eyes. the sound of wheels turning slow, rusty, and terrified. Harold leaned back, exhaled through his nose. "Dana doesn't make noise," he said quietly, "unless she's already pulled the trigger. If she's contacted Janice Marrow." Harold let the sentence hang. They both knew Janice didn't play. The silence thickened. Ethan stood, fists clenching and unclenching as reality finally seeped through the cracks in his designer armor. Harold tapped the contract once. "You didn't fire an employee, Ethan," he said quietly. "You declared war on the wrong goddamn general." Started small. The kind of hiccups no one notices at first, till they stack up like dirty dishes in a bachelor's sink. Wednesday. A freight order bound for Milwaukee never arrived. The client called once, then twice, furious by the third ring. Thursday, 2 invoices disappeared from the system. Not delayed, not misfiled, just gone, like they'd never existed. Friday, the West Hub routed a shipment of car batteries to Vermont. Instead of Virginia, it's costing $6,000 in rush corrections and an apology email that sounded like it was written by a sleep-deprived intern nursing a concussion. Each incident alone was manageable. Together, they were the exact kind of paper cuts Dana had spent 15 years cauterizing before anyone ever felt pain. Now they bled freely. The office buzzed with that sick, electric energy, the kind that settles in when a storm's coming. And no one knows who packed an umbrella. Dana's name wasn't spoken loudly, but it was everywhere in the break room, in Slack threads disguised as memes, in whispers over frozen lean cuisines and passive-aggressive post-its. "Did you see the clause?" someone murmured near the printer. "She had IP rights or something, right? That's serious." Heard she emailed the board before she even left the parking lot. Waytethan fired her. That little golem. "My cousin's in legal says it might be breach, like breach. Janice Marrow didn't respond to gossip. She didn't need to. The fact that she hadn't publicly defended Ethan said enough. People noticed. They always noticed when Janice went quiet, like a forest right before a cougar jumps. Then came the real kicker. It was junior dev turned systems analyst, soft-spoken, sharper than he let on. Allergic to confrontation, he'd been assigned a routine task: review internal code dependencies before the next warehouse software update. 2 hours into the audit, he found it. A single line of code buried inside their automated load balancing script, adapted from original LFP Langston protocol. Copyright. Langston Jaime stared at the screen for a full minute. Then he checked the dev logs. Dana hadn't just written the original framework. Her protocols were the framework. Repackaged, renamed, sure. But the skeleton, the DNA humming through the logistics chain, was hers. All of it. Jaime did what any smart junior does. In a corporate horror story, he quietly screenshotted everything, zipped it into a folder labeled just in case, printed the key section, and slipped it onto his manager's desk with a sticky note. "Think we owe Dana royalties?" That sticky note made it 3 desks over by lunch. HR saw it by 3 p.m., legal by 5. By Monday, Harold's inbox held 15 separate threads, all marked urgent. Subject: Langston IP rights. Dana never said a word. No tweets. No vague "God closes doors" LinkedIn post. No public meltdown. She didn't need to. Absence became its own kind of presence, like realizing a load-bearing beam is missing only after the roof starts to sag. No tantrums, no threats. It's just quiet, cascading chaos, and somewhere between flickering monitors and middle, managers silently praying Ethan wouldn't schedule another town hall. A truth settled in colder than fact. Dana Langston wasn't just a former employee. She was now a loaded gun the company had tossed onto the boardroom table, and no one dared touch it. Subject line: Notice of Contract Breach Clause 1 to CIP Ownership Review sent 6:02 A.M. Right as the building lights flickered on and half the C-suite still had pillow creases on their faces. Dana's timing was always surgical. The email was short. 5 paragraphs, zero fluff, no anger, no threats. No demands. Just precision. Dear board members, on the date of my termination, I was informed without prior board consultation or approval that my role had been eliminated, as outlined in my employment agreement, Clause 1 to C. Such restructuring actions require approval due to the active deployment of Langston Freight Protocol (LFP), architecture, and associated intellectual property. This termination occurred while said systems remained in core operational use and without formal consent. For your reference, I've attached documentation outlining my IP contributions. Active code fragments still in live deployment, and a signed copy of the original agreement. While I trust this was an administrative oversight, the legal implications of contract breach and royalty delinquency require clarification. I remain available for resolution discussions. Attachments: Langston Original Contract PDFL FPIP Overview PDF. Freight Ops Code Excerpts Dana CCD. No one from HR. No one from Ethan's team. Just the board. Then she stood up from her kitchen table, poured the last of the Merlot, and started making avocado toast like it was any other morning. Because for Dono it was. This was routine. This was what happened when someone mistook silence for surrender. By 8 a.m., the replies began. The first came from Marta Dewey, compliance watchdog and resident hawk. 4 words: when are you available? The second was from Janice Marrow. We need to talk. Soon at 8:37 a.m., someone blind copied Dana on an internal thread titled Urgent. Termination protocol review plus royalty risk exposure. Dana didn't reply. She didn't need to. She already knew. What came next? At 9:10 a.m. A quiet panic rippled through the top floor. Boardroom doors closed early. Calendars were wiped clean. Someone canceled Ethan's 10 a.m. vision for the future. Webinar without telling him. Harold Langford walked in carrying a manila folder and the unmistakable expression of a man about to eat his own mistakes. Legal had already begun pulling records. Every signature Ethan had scrolled past since Dana walked out. Updated NDAs, vendor renewals, a shiny new partnership with a supply chain analytics firm built on software still running. Langston code. And that's when they saw it. Not only had Dana been terminated without board consent, Ethan had greenlit a system overhaul that quietly duplicated her original framework. No compensation, no attribution. Words like willful infringement began appearing in emails. So did malicious restructuring. 1. Attorney wrote it plainly. She's not just owed back pay. She may be owed retroactive equity corrections. Outside the glass walls, Ethan smiled for a photo op with social media interns. Something about innovation culture. Inside, a very different kind of innovation was unfolding. An unscheduled audit. A flood of legal memos. The first real murmurs of board-level dissatisfaction no PR filter could fix. Dana still hadn't replied. Because power doesn't knock twice. It lets itself in quietly, wearing silence. Like a tailored suit and carrying receipts sharp, enough to split careers in half. Ethan found out about the private board session the same way he'd found out about most things lately, by being the last to know. He wandered into the executive lounge mid-morning, caramel oat milk latte in hand, scrolling LinkedIn influencers like they were fortune cookies. That's when he saw it. Janice Marrow walking into conference. Room B with Harold, Marta, and the entire legal team behind her. No invite, no heads up. No courtesy loop you in from Rhonda. She didn't even glance at him. She walked straight, past folder tucked under her arm. Langston IP Clause 12-something inside Ethan shifted. A sensation he didn't recognize. Cold, wet panic shapes. Lid. In beneath the teeth-grinding arrogance, he power-walked back to his office, slammed the door harder than intended, and dialed Dana's number. Ring. Ring. Voicemail. He tried again. Straight to voicemail. This time he left a message. Hey Dana, Think we maybe got off on the wrong foot. Just wanted to figure this out privately. Call me back, okay? Even he didn't believe it. His voice cracked on the word privately. 15 minutes later, a reply arrived. Not from Dana, from her old autosponder still active on her personal. Gmail, thank you for your message. I'm currently unavailable. If this is urgent, please contact someone who didn't call me non-essential. Ethan slammed his phone onto the desk, knocking over a glass paperweight. Its shattered, jagged fragments catching the light like small, sharp reminders he wasn't in control. And then came the final nail. Ethan stormed down to DevOps, breathing like a cartoon villain, demanding Jaime, the junior analyst who'd flagged the code, show me the damn system logs. Jaime, halfway through a diet soda and visibly shaking, pulled up a terminal and opened the live operations script. Ethan stared at line after line of code, not fully understanding any of IT until Jaime highlighted a section. Copyright D. Langston LFP Core Logic v2.4 do not modify without legal clearance. Use of this software without a licensing agreement constitutes breach of IP. It's ownership terms. It wasn't just one tag. There were hundreds. Watermarked metadata, nested modules, version histories. Everything traceable. Dana hadn't just built the system, she'd branded it quietly, legally, permanently, like cattle. What if we just rewrite it? Ethan asked, lips twitching. Reformat it. Strip the tags. Quick fix. Jaime froze mid-keystroke, sir. That would be fraud. We said anything about fraud? Ethan snapped. I'm talking modernization. Get creative. Maybe there's a bonus in it for you? He tossed the word bonus like he'd seen it. Work in movies. Jaime's silence answered louder than any whistle. By 4 p.m., Jaime had emailed HRCCING Legal with a transcript of Ethan's modernization suggestion. At the top, one simple line. This made me uncomfortable. Please advise it. Didn't take long for that email to reach Janice or Harold. Or the board session Ethan still hadn't been invited to by 5:15 p.m. Ethan's keycard was quietly downgraded. Not revoked, just adjusted. He hadn't noticed yet, but he would, because desperation smells like fear. And fear, once it starts to rot, attracts attention. The kind that eats empires. Harold didn't knock. He stood outside Dana's front door longer than any self-respecting CEO should, holding a manila folder like a ransom demand. No crisp power suit this time. Just slacks and a windbreaker. This wasn't business. It was cleanup. Dana opened the door slowly. No smile, no greeting. Just that surgical stillness she wore like armor. 5 minutes, Harold said. Then I'll go. She stepped aside without a word. The house looked exactly as he remembered, clean lines, muted tones, nothing flashy except the dining table, neatly stacked legal documents, case studies, a framed photo of Dana with her dogs on a beach, and a yellow legal pad covered in handwritten bullet points, less like notes. It's more like a war map. She didn't offer coffee. He didn't ask. I was wrong, Harold began, eyes. Dal, I never should have let him near that seat. I thought giving him a taste would scare him straight. Humble him. I thought he'd destroy the company, Dana finished, voice flat. By gutting the one person who kept it alive 10 times over. Yeah, Harold said quietly, that too. Silence. Dana didn't sigh. Didn't blink. She slid a folder across the table. Reinstatement offer, she said, effective immediately. 6 months back pay, retroactive equity adjustment tied to performance. Milestones hit using my IP, and a 2-year licensing agreement for all current and derivative systems under my terms. Harold didn't open it. He stared at it like it might go off if you don't sign. Dana continued evenly. I'll walk into Carrington Freight tomorrow at 9 a.m. I've already had coffee with their CTO. He knows what I built. He knows what I still own. She paused, and he's very interested in licensing it, especially now that your board understands how exposed you are. You'd burn it all. Harold asked, almost pleading. She tilted her head. No, I'd charge what it's worth. That's when it hit him. Dana wasn't here for revenge. She was here for balance, for order, for respect, and she'd built her case brick by brick with the same precision she once used to rewire his freight network during the '08 collapse. You don't want the rollback. Harold asked carefully. No, she said. Not like it. Was? She leaned back. But I'll take something better. Something cleaner. Harold nodded, hands trembling slightly as he reached for a pen. I'll handle Ethan, he muttered. He's still my son, but Dana raised a hand. Calm. Ice cold. No, she said. Let him face the board first. She settled into her chair, expression unreadable. Let him learn what it feels like to be declared non-essential by people who actually read the paperwork. Harold looked up, eyes tired. You always said you didn't believe in revenge. Harold said quietly. Dana smiled for the first time. I don't, she replied. I believe in consequences. Ethan strutted into the boardroom like it was. A TED Talk he hadn't rehearsed but felt confident he could wing. Trademark half smirk in place. Blazer tight enough to scream, thought leader. His eyes bounced from face to face, hunting for a friendly nod. None came. The room wasn't tense. It wasn't angry. It was still like the space between lightning and thunder. And then he saw her. Dana sat at the far end of the table, calm, centered, a closed folder resting in front of her. Fingers laced, like a courtroom witness who already knew the verdict. She didn't look at him. Ethan's smirk slipped. He adjusted his collar and cleared his throat. Morning, everyone. Excited to share some updates? No need. Janice cut in without lifting her eyes from the folder in her lap. We've already had a very enlightening morning. Ethan blinked. Sorry. Marta, seated beside her, raised a page and read aloud. Clause 1 to C. No structural or leadership changes, including termination or reassignment, may be executed without written consent from Miss Langston if company operations are utilizing intellectual property authored or designed by her during active employment. She paused. Which they were, and which they are. Next, the board's legal counsel spoke. Per discovery, approximately 70% of current freight system operations utilize proprietary code structures derived from the Langston Protocol. Any attempt to alter or replace this code would require a minimum of 6 months and full relicensing clearance. Dana still said nothing. Harold sat at the head of the table, hands folded, eyes forward, not defending, not condemning. Watching Ethan. Laughed, dry, thin. Okay, but look, we're all on the same team here, he said. Dana, you could have just talked to me. No need to drag the whole board into this. Dana moved for the first time, slowly, deliberately. She opened her folder and slid a flash drive across the polished wood. Press play, she said. Her voice was quiet, razor sharp. Marta inserted the drive. The screen behind them lit up. A clean, high-speed walkthrough of the company's freight automation system filled the wall. Real-time routing, load balancing projections, predictive delays. Every component humming like a finely tuned engine. In the bottom right corner, small, permanent, powered by D. Langston, IP Holdings, silence. Followed. The kind that ends careers. Then the CFO spoke. 3 vendors have already reached out. 1 is preparing legal action for failure to disclose IP ownership in system contracts. If this isn't resolved, we're looking at breach litigation, royalty exposure, and license restructuring at scale. Ethan's jaw twitched. So what? He snapped. You're siding with her over me? No, Janice said evenly. We're siding with the company over liability. She turned to Dana. Miss Langston, have your terms changed? Dana nodded once. Only the speed had changed. Harold cleared his throat. The board has reviewed and approved reinstatement pending final sign-off. Effective immediately. Dana Langston would resume under the title Executive Director of Systems Integrity with independent oversight authority. The vote passed unanimously. Dana didn't reach for the contract. Instead, she stood and adjusted her blazer. "I appreciate the offer," she said calmly, "but I won't be returning." A ripple moved through the room. She met Harold's eyes. "I already took another meeting. Carrington Freight. They made me an offer I'd be foolish to refuse. Full licensing autonomy. No Langfords involved." Ethan opened his mouth. Dana cut him off with a glance colder than any shout. She gathered her folder, headed for the door, then paused. "To whoever replaces me," she said without turning back, "start by changing the system passwords. I don't trust what's still in his inbox." And with that she left .com complete untouchable. Ethan slumped into his chair, sweat darkening his designer collar as the board quietly began discussing interim leadership. No one asked his opinion. They never would again.